So, and I 100% agree. I can't wait till the election's over. So, in our next session, we're going to dive a bit more back into the technical topics. So we're going to have a discussion on the vSOC roadmap, moving from 3.0 to 4.0. So 4.0 sounds like good progress to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. First up, we have Giuseppe Serio. He's Vice President of Market Development at Upstream Security, and he's previously held leadership positions at IBM in connected vehicles and automotive security, as well as PricewaterhouseCoopers. And Mike Lexa is CISO and Global Vice President of IT Infrastructure at Case New Holland Industrial. We'll have to talk a little bit because I'm a John Deere guy more than a CNH guy, but that's okay. We'll still welcome you up. Mike has also been a CISO and Global Direct at Donaldson, VP of Engineering and Enterprise IT at Intrust, and GM of Information Security and Compliance at Target. So let's welcome Giuseppe and Mike up to the stage.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. You haven't missed out the day, so it's not the reception dinner yet. We're talking a little bit about vSOC, as Kevin made in his introduction. Before we do so, I'd like, Mike, thank you, first of all, for being with us today. Maybe a brief introduction about yourself, a little bit more.
I heard Kevin introduce it, and I didn't appreciate the John Deere comment, but I understand some of our green friends might be in the audience. But I work for Case New Holland, so we're the world's second largest ag and equipment manufacturer. In the States here, if you look out in the fields, we're usually the red or the blue equipment. I've been at the company for about 4 years. I'm excited to share the story. I think most of the audience here, probably 90+% of you, are passenger side. So coming from the ag side, although that sounds different, and there's certainly many differences, I think there's a lot of things we can learn from each other. So looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So paving the way from 3.0 to 4.0, what does it mean? If you attended the last summit in California, we were talking actually about going from 2 to 3. So let me provide you a little bit more of a context if you're new to this idea. In general, when we talk about 1.0, 2.0, it's about waves that we see in the market related to the evolution of the vSOC. What it really means, number one was, hey, we need to get fit and ready for the purpose, meaning regulations kicking in, so let's get ready. Number two was, how can we go the next step and bring in more automation as we have kind of set the scene, we have the processes in place. And number three, this is the topic that we talked last year, saying now, okay, we have a lot of data, probably it's also a good idea to leverage the capabilities of technologies such as Gen AI to help security analysts progress with the evolving threat landscape, but more and more additional data that needs to be part of it. Yep. Mike, now from your perspective, and you rightly mentioned, you have a very specific angle from where you're looking at the industry, meaning agriculture is a different type of a segment. In your day-to-day challenges and the top requirements that you see ahead of you, what do you think are those when you think about vSOC?
Right. So I assume I'm talking to peers, so a lot of what I say I think is just reinforcement of best practices. But like when I think of vSOC, if I take a step back, what I have to do right now is I protect 3 areas: IT, our plants, and our products, or the vSOC. And when you dumb it down, largely the approach, at least I think, are best practices that we take, they're shared. I don't know how much it necessarily matters what industry you're in, but for us, you know, as Giuseppe mentioned, any time you start, it's getting a full understanding of your attack surface, pulling in the right monitoring and logs, but that's noisy and there's a lot to it. So for the vSOC, for anything, what we do is, and I think this is, you know, top quartile where a 3.0 SOC would be, you have to be intelligence-led. I don't see any other way to do it, because otherwise it's just, there's too much. So for us, and what I see as best practices is always constantly know who your adversaries are, build your own capabilities, partner with others, but then based on that, every day be tuning what are IOCs or TTPs you have to look for. We like MITRE, and if you think about it across the 100 or so attack frameworks or approaches people may take, any one of those attackers is going to probably choose 5 to 10 on any given day. They'll change that, but any given day it's about that amount. And then we tune, and we're constantly tuning our defenses to alert and have that fidelity be louder. So to me, that's a leading vSOC, but that's a leading cyber defense team.
Yeah, and that notion, when we look at the vast amount of data that the future vSOC needs to handle, and you see some slides here from our recent report, it's really about how to enable the analyst team to cope with such large amount of data, but more importantly, the magnitude and the scale of the attack that happen. And you see here in the data, it's a 2.5 increase, 2.5x increase into the vast millions of affecting millions of vehicles. What do you think is the role of Gen AI in this context? Is that helpful?
Certainly helpful. So I see it as you need to know your data. So what do you want to detect? Then how do you tune it? And then how do you respond to it? And where I see Gen AI helping and stepping in, today as we get that information, a lot of it's our own people writing scripts or using automation where possible. Gen AI can certainly help there. But I think if you look 12, 24 months out, where I'm optimistic, I haven't seen it on the market yet, but where you have more of a virtual assistant, an advisor, a trusted advisor who's sitting there and they're guiding us. Every way from refinement of that intel to then having a conversation, with a technical trusted advisor, and then ultimately getting to where it's pushing out and changing your controls. Yeah, I mean, data is powerful. I think the other thing that it brings to light here, and this might be part of our conversation, what I'm seeing within the vSOC, which I haven't seen in other areas, is, and you see this a little bit on the OT side, but meaning plants, we're getting more analytics in most of our departments. And it's figuring out what do I carve off to protect us, but what is that data I'm seeing that might be useful for other departments? From a service side to a quality side, there's just a lot there. It's exciting.
How do we cope with what you just said? And here's an example of one of a recent API attack that was carried out. How do we weave in the API? So it's a friend and foe, so enabling things on one hand, and on the other hand, knowing that something can happen because it needs to be well protected.
Totally. We were talking about this a little bit last night. So I remember it was just even like 4 or 5 years ago, I would have stakeholders I'd work with trying to convince me that it's just an API, Mike, there's nothing to worry about, right? And I think people are now past that, and we see the attacks. But to me, it's just one more new thing. I don't think there's a need to overcomplicate it, right? And it's like, so how do you solve APIs? I think the first thing you need to do is just understand what you have. It's asset management, and there's capabilities coming to the market that we're employing to help us scan and just identify them. So the first thing is just what do you have? And then putting in almost like application security best practices to scan these things, identify where there's weaknesses, and have the right relationships to talk to people. So again, I don't think there's anything at all exotic there, but that's the way we're backing into it.
Let's talk for a minute, and we heard this in the introduction from Kevin earlier this morning, the impact, 2 things. One, the CDK attack, which is affecting not the product per se, but its wider ecosystem, and obviously it has impact on how the ability to sell cars. Right. And number 2 is the notion of ransomware. I believe from what I've seen is I could coin 2024 as the year of ransomware. Yeah. Do you agree?
I agree, and I would probably answer it slightly differently. Like there's certainly CDK, there's United Health Group. Is it the year of ransomware? It seems like every year is the year of ransomware. It was about 9 or so years ago, there was, I think, a real shift where And I correlate a lot of it to when in the States, our credit cards got chips in it. All of a sudden that attack vector really dropped, right? And PII got so exhausted, it was like, what's the next place for us to make money is ransomware. And every year, year over year, it grows and it grows. And was this year more than last year? I'm sure it was. But to me, the thing that's striking, which I see a change in 24, and I didn't coin this term, but I absolutely buy into it, is you hear now people talking about it as multifaceted extortion versus ransomware, because any sophisticated actor, if they have time, yes, they're going to encrypt your systems, but they're going to look around, they're going to see what do you have that they can then also say, if you don't pay, we're going to expose this, and they're going to look for the scariest, most embarrassing thing, and they'll go after your executives. I mean, they'll look for personal embarrassing stuff. And so that's, to me, what's striking, because this is now being commonplace, and for us as security professionals, it's just, maybe your data protection, your attack surface, you have to think about a little bit broader and put more resiliency in those areas, just like you would other areas that would be attacked.
Now, the interesting thing about this attack is, and for a minute, let's put on the hat of a CISO, which you're obviously part of that community. It's not only the damage per se, because I believe the reported damage was like $25 million, but the collateral damage that happened is estimated to be 1 billion, so it's roughly 50x of what is really. So in the conversation, how do you see from a CISO perspective, what does this mean in order to have a conversation with the management? Because
Absolutely.
These days, I think everyone in this industry knows how important it is to have the budgets to continue supporting the innovations and protecting the innovations that are out there. So what is your thought on that?
Tabletop, to make those tabletops as real as possible, and I think that's one way to bring truth to this. But we're always talking threats, at least quarterly, to our executives and our board. I'm always bringing that forward. It's always part of our conversation. I think it ties back into the importance I put on intelligence gathering, because a lot of intelligence is then having intimacy with who's attacking you and making that real wherever you can. Share incidents that you experience. A lot of times those are locked down. You can't get into the details, so it's easier to talk about the CDKs, United Health Groups, those that are in parallel industries. Again, I think what Giuseppe's saying is just absolutely best practice. I don't believe in FUD, but at the same time, I think you have to share what you're seeing. And if you kind of dumb down what is the responsibility of my role or all of our roles, it's being fully transparent, and that ties into governance and accountability. And unless you're telling the truth with metrics, using examples, and making sure people appreciate that risk, I don't think you're doing your job.
Yeah. And what about the growing attack surface in that context? Again, as a CISO, it's overwhelming to see how the proliferation of technology and innovation is adding complexity to what needs to be managed, right?
And I find it exciting. Like, you always probably back into it with similarity when there's a new attack surface. At a company level, that probably ties into strong governance, right? And that's challenging, but it's so important. For those of you familiar with like the NIST framework, they just added a 6th domain as governance to put emphasis there. But I think where you see it, which is cool, and upstream is doing this too, but it's how the industry is rising to the occasion and technology keeps evolving. Like when I think of plants or OT on the manufacturing side, 5 years ago, it was just segment it and hope for the best. And now you see, full new stacks of capabilities that have been built to do this. Nozomi, Dragos, Microsoft, Clarity, right? So you've seen the industry rise to the occasion. Frankly, there's a money-making opportunity. And I think we see the same thing for the vSOC. Again, the passenger side, you guys are a little bit ahead of us. But for the ag side, I mean, these are legitimate $1 million robots. Take what you put on the road, and I've seen 10x factors of the onboard systems we have to deploy, and all of those take unique solutions and new ways to think about it. So yes, you're exactly right. I find it really exciting because that's where you get an opportunity to whiteboard out new ideas and say, how do we solve this?
Okay, now let's do another exercise.
Yeah.
Now that we have talked about the CISO hat, let's talk about the CEO hat for a second. Now, if we look into 2025, what do you think are priorities that you need to discuss with your vSOC teams and also the management? And what do you think, what type of expertise and also capabilities need to be integrated going forward?
Yep. So I think this answers the question, but again, if I look to the audience, most of you are the passenger side, and when we look at self-driving vehicles or where R&D is going, I think a way to answer it is looking at the motivation of your customer. So like for you guys, what you're doing, most of you, if I go and I buy a Tesla, and I don't want to pick on a favorite, but like, why do I do that as a consumer? It's really awesome acceleration, right? It's cool. There's probably some environmental play there, but you're doing it from a personal decision. Like when I look at what is our roadmap for ag, and if I think about it more as a kind of a CEO or executive, what drives our investment, our purpose, the farmers today, this is a business decision. Like these are extremely high-end, capable machines. And what the difference is not only do they have to have all the autonomy to be able to safely drive on a road, but in a field, but the amount of sensors and data that are being pulled in, they then use on the back end to drive profitability, to make decisions for that season or the next year. I mean, the input prices are just going up like crazy. When I say that, you think everything from land to extensive labor shortages to chemical applications to seed to GPS coordinates. All of those things they need to make decisions to how can I become more profitable. So it's kind of what the passenger side's doing, plus a lot more information we have to manage, we have to protect, we have to make sense of.
Yeah, now as you mentioned rightly, there's a lot that the passenger segment can learn of what you guys are doing in terms of automation and also IoT. And I think this brings us to the fourth wave, which we have kind of alluded to. So the combination of IoT, wider IoT, not only in the vehicle and aftermarket, but also the need to automate is something that will foster going forward the market. Now, what do you see in terms of looking into the future? What would be a good discussion for the management to have the attention that actually the vSOC is not just there to protect, but actually it's also an enabler to make sure that the business is running smoothly?
Yeah, that's always a tricky one. How do you sell a vSOC, a SOC, or just cyber to your organization? And I think it's always hard to associate profitability with it. It's, we're all kind of an insurance policy, we're risk avoidance. I think if you work in a security company or if you work in a technical company, there might be a more direct line. I can say, hey, as I dog food your products, here's what's good and bad. But for me, like for what I do, it's more about there's an overused adage, but security, if it's done right, we're kind of like the brakes on a car, lets you go faster. So to me, it's that. It's giving capabilities to those teams which need to be able to experiment. They need to move fast. Give them safety so they can do it without taking risks. I don't know how I can equate that to driving profitability, but that's probably the best way I help the business.
What is it that agriculture can learn from passenger vehicle?
What is, yeah.
The regulation, that the advancement, I think that's not just right now something that the 155 is probably one angle. Is there more?
Well, I mean, the regulation angle, there's that. There's CRA for those of you that are aware in Europe. I mean, there's all that stuff we're preparing for. Do we prepare differently from you? I don't know. I mean, I'm maybe not as prepared for this question, but I think that I would, I don't know if there's any thing besides just the way we approach things and how I had started the conversation. I don't think what we're doing is necessarily unique to an industry that is ag, auto, it doesn't matter. I think we just are every day looking for what are the new things we have to solve, being creative, having the right team, having the right, I'm not telling you anything new here, so. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We heard it earlier, and I think we need to have also a discussion about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute about China. What is your perspective on,
Yeah.
I mean, automotive in general is a truly global and international industry, and operating in China is, as we heard earlier, probably a big challenge.
We all hear it. I heard the last speaker, she had touched on it too. But when I think of China, there's a lot. But we probably have some unique risks that maybe others don't within ag. So there's their 2025 plan. It's, you may have heard of it. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. It's their 13th five-year plan. And you know, they don't hide what they're going after for information. And of those 10 areas, one of them is agriculture equipment, and in particular, autonomous capabilities and everything that we're building and investing in. So it's, when I think China, that's where I go first. It's protection of sensitive data. There's the regulations that are coming. You know, within China, how do we continue to do what we need to do safely and operate over there? I'm not going to get in tons of detail on that. But then, obviously, the new regulation we've seen in the U.S. It just came out. I think it's coming into effect in 27 through 30, where you can't have software or onboard capabilities from China within your vehicles. We do a lot of in-house development, the vast majority, so that's not a concern for me. So to answer the question, it's something we think about regularly. To me, it's around data theft.
Yeah, and we see that as well. So in our industry, it's also a thing to being asked, hey, can you share source code if you want to operate in China? And obviously that's more than a challenge to provide that, because this is something that nobody would be doing just for the sake of doing business in China. Now, we touched on it, but I wanted to go back to this AI thing, and we heard there's different topics around AI. Now, do you see AI being used by the bad guys? Is that a thing? And should we, as the good guys, counter that with AI in general?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and when Giuseppe asked me about how do you share risks, this is one thing I often will speak to is, you know, the bad guys, and I don't think everybody, you guys do, but, you know, as you talk to audiences, I think this is always striking for them. They're some of the earliest adopters of technology out there. I mean, more than anybody, right? First of all, it's all about ROI. They're just running a business. This helps them to become more profitable. But they have the benefit of, one, they only need to find a crack in the dam for us, right? So they can, you know, use it to their advantage. But probably more importantly, they don't have to go through QA. They don't have to worry about breaking shit, right? They can just take this stuff. It's new. Let me try it out and go. So yes, and I think it's a lot of AI against AI is what it's going to become. You know, what are some of the cool things I hear about or I'm in discussions where I see coming? It's again, back to that intel. How do you have AI do it for you? Bring it in, ingest it, cater it to your team. That's kind of obvious. I think where you take a step farther, which ends up being cool, but again, I think there's risks to doing this. It's then, based on what it's seeing, can it on your behalf refine your policies, or even better, your configuration settings? Okay, I see an attack. They're probably coming after this target. Here's how they're going to do it. Can I tighten down just in this area and then expand as that attack goes away? And there's, you know, the other thing, which is probably a little bit more on the horizon, which I find really fascinating, is I've heard them referred to as deception technology. But like, if you got that attack coming and you're tightening your configs and you think it might be going this way, again, you're obviously want to catch it as far left as you can, the kill chain. But building honeypots, standing them up on the fly to kind of catch and kill and confirm, right? And it's right here. But the other thing where I think there is a really great opportunity is the one advantage we have going for us against the attackers is we know our environment, right? But to do that, you need really good asset management, and ideally it goes a step farther where it can lay out your architectures and know exactly how your system is. You know, think about it like as a defender, we can walk the hallways in the dark and know where the corners are. that's the advantage we have over the people coming against us. So how do we use our capabilities to know exactly what's out there and then do proactive controls? I think the other thing, which isn't necessarily happening yet, I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but as all this stuff comes in, how do it has to be a cycle where you're feeding your findings back into engineering, back into those teams to make changes too.
How can Gen AI help in this context? I mean, we talked about the sheer amount of data explosion with not only on the SDV side itself, the product, but the entire ecosystem in order to operate a vehicle or a SDV.
Right. A high-level answer to that, I think, there's different phases that everybody, Meta's got their phases, everybody has their phases of how you see it, AI developing, and I would say just those things I just mentioned, and there's probably tons of other examples, just how I see that sequencing playing out is just, at first it's going to be better data, better quality data, better identification of anomalies. That's obvious. Then it's going to progress to your virtual assistants. Again, that could be, if you can think it up, you can probably apply a decision support mechanism. I think where it's going to become really cool, but complicated is when it's going to run on its own. So again, I'm not saying anything new here, but that's how I would see applying it to vSOC, to any SOC capability we have.
What does it mean for a fleet then?
Well, I mean, with a fleet, and this is a broad thing too. This is where ag is a little bit different. It's the monitoring, but as an agriculture fleet in the future, and again, cars and trucks are a little bit, are probably much closer to this, but the management of it is going to just be an endpoint, okay? But a sophisticated endpoint. And how do we use our tooling to stay ahead of that? What makes me more nervous is the unknowns of things that we haven't experienced in the industry. As that data pushes from onboard systems more to the edge or in the cloud, the attack surface grows. How do you apply AI to prevent it? But it's all the patching, the maintenance, everything that comes with protecting something. Again, this isn't a laptop in my fleet. This is something a customer owns. And I think complexity with that is if my iPhone, I'm on it every single day, right? Non-stop. So if I need to get an update, I can get an update. When I think of ag equipment, and this is a generality, but a lot of these things can sit parked for, you use them twice a year for your planting and your harvest season. Well, there's not a tolerance to turn these things up and have boot times, to wait for patches to come through. But as 0 days increase and these things become targets, we're going to have to do that. So I think it's not necessarily an answer, but it's more things I think about to that question.
Yeah, and maybe if you can share an example, how does an attack in ag look like?
So, I guess the things you would look for, it's just a variance from norm. It could be binary things, up, down, right? Like things started when it shouldn't have started. Or, you could see people monkeying with horsepower or, just any configuration change. And again, how do you got to peel back to say, how is your authentication? Who did it? Why did they do it? What's the motivation? How do you build baselines to it? But for an attack today, there's not really over-the-air risk right now, but that's coming. So for me to compromise a vehicle, I have to have proximity to a farm, which a small farm today is a couple thousand acres. So there's hundreds of thousand-acre farms, and they'll have their own network. So I'd have to compromise that network, or I'd compromise a dealer. That's how I would take out a vehicle, or not to get into details, but do bad stuff today. But as these things become more autonomous, as we're more technology leaning, as you do have over the air, your attack surface blows up, and that's what makes me concerned.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really enjoyed your insights. I would like to thank you for listening and extend the invite to the dinner upstream reception at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, shall I stand?